Hi, welcome to Project Management Matters. This is a podcast where we talk about all things project management, whether it's a PMO, project, program, or portfolio management. What we're really interested in is the trends and the activities that are taking place and are shaping the world of project management. Today, I have with me Dave Pryor. Dave, I think we met back in, 2008. This was actually a fun activity because this was when I was PMI chair and there was an event happening in Cairo. And I think this was the first time
Oh,
that
yeah.
we met face to face. So it was kind of an exciting time where we had an opportunity to engage and got to meet a lot of people from different parts of the
Yeah.
world. And I don't know if this was your first foray outside the US with PMI and activities back
It was
then.
my first time to Egypt. And I tell people this story a lot, but I am so grateful to you for the advice and that you had and the time that you spent with us kind of working through all that stuff back then, because there was a lot going on, and your wisdom was greatly appreciated.
Thanks. It's always fun because PMI is always in this renewal
Yes.
process, and there's a lot to discuss in terms of what's happening.
Yeah.
When we met back in 2008, obviously you weren't new to project
Right.
management, and it would be great to kind of share that journey.
Sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into project management, what excited you about it, and maybe share a little bit about your PMI journey as well.
Okay. So I'll try to make it as brief as possible, but I am a refugee of the music business. That's what I'd planned to do with my life until I tried many corners of it and realized I suck at working in the music business. I called a friend of mine at Nickelodeon, and she gave me a job monitoring chat rooms for little kids. And I started to do that and eventually ended up building games and content areas, and walked into a closet one day and there was this box on the shelf that said Microsoft Project 4. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I installed it on my machine. And getting out of college, I had just been like struggling. I couldn't find my place. I couldn't find my niche. And then when I put that software on the computer and I started working with it, I'm like, this is my thing. Like, I'm really, really good at planning stuff. I love the planning activity. I find it very soothing. And I really like having a bunch of people that I'm trying to coordinate their work and get them to do stuff. And so for me, I mean, nobody sets out to be a project manager, I don't think, but for me, it was like a recognition of like, I am very well suited to this. I'm a little bit OCD. I come from a fairly dysfunctional family. So getting yelled at and blamed for stuff, which is sort of, bread and butter for project managers. It was like the place where I fit. And so that was a really great thing for me. But that was the beginning of the dot-com boom. And I was trying to learn more about the craft of project management. I was really, really lucky in that one of the shops that I worked at, they hired a guy to teach me and somebody else how to be project managers. And the first thing he said was, this old man with a beard, and he was chain smoking and drinking coffee and chewing gum all at the same time. And he's like, when I'm done with you, everything is a project. And within 3 days, I stopped brushing my teeth. I had a series of activities with a measure of success, which included dental hygiene. And like everything in my world just became about work breakdown structure. So it changed how I saw things, but everything made more sense to me through that. So when I got past that, the only place I could find to learn more about the craft was PMI. So I volunteered in 2002, I think. I got my PMP in 2002. Started volunteering maybe a year or two after that, and it was because we had the SIGs back then, and I saw the IT&T SIGs website, and it was awful, and that was my background. So I just reached out. And I was like, "Hey, I can fix this for you. Can I help you?" And you talk about a PMI journey. Like I can never stop telling people, like, if you want to build a career, build a network, you volunteer, you give your time away, but what you get back tenfold. So, and that's how we met. And the relationships that I've been able to build through that volunteer work, through PMI. I mean, I've been able to travel all over the world. I have a global network of friends and mentors and colleagues, and almost all that came from volunteering for PMI. So it's been very instrumental in my career development, my professional life, like everything. Can't say enough good things about it.
That's fantastic. I think that the journey is somewhat similar to a lot of people who are accidental project managers, but many fall in love with the profession and they kind of find a home for themselves in that space, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, and I think you learn a lot about yourself as you're learning to practice the craft. Whatever aspect of it is, it's always teaching you more about yourself too, which I really like.
What surprised you about being in project management coming from a music background?
Wow. Well, I worked. This is going to be a really negative example. The things I did in the music business. I played in bands. I worked in a recording studio in Philadelphia, Sigma Sound, which is where all the Philadelphia music came from. And I worked at Arista Records for Clive Davis. I was his. If people know who he is, that's a big deal. If you don't, it doesn't matter. But I was his nighttime assistant. And the things that I learned in the studio were a lot about how not to treat people because they treated us really badly. I was like an intern, became like an assistant, and the guy that ran it just was constantly yelling and screaming. So I built up a tolerance for that, which was helpful later on when I had clients. But Clive Davis, I mean, I worked for the guy for like 2 or 3 years, and the things that I learned from that man about how to interact with people, especially like, I mean, people of high stature. He's the guy that signed Bruce Springsteen and Whitney Houston and Pink Floyd and Janis Joplin and like all these massive artists. He would have to like, he'd get a song from them and he'd have to send them a letter that says like, this song is not gonna work, but you are amazing. And just the way that he treated people, I learned so much from that experience, and that carried into project management. So I always tell people that if you want to be a project manager, the two jobs that make you like really, really well suited for that, if you've ever waited tables or lived off your tips, because you have to learn how to be of service to others, because it's never about you, it's about the people you're working with. That's a really big part of it. And being an administrative assistant to an executive, it's the same thing. Like you are of service. And to me, that's what this job is really all about. It's not about you being in control or getting praise or anything like that. You enable other people to shine.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that resonates with me is if I look at both the world of consulting and the world of project management, what you described is almost kind of two archetypes. One is the user and abuser, and sometimes you have professionals who are extremely skilled at doing the job and getting things done, being successful,
Yeah.
but they tend to kind of use team members. And then, the worst thing that you could possibly have is a team member say, this person is brilliant, but I never want to work with them
Right.
again. And then the other side of that is someone who is able to really engage the team and make it not just a meaningful project, but a powerful journey together.
Yeah.
And they build teams. I've seen these type of personalities on both sides of the spectrum and everything in between. And it's a very valuable lesson to keep in mind if you're interested in building a community. Because one thing that I've noticed is that when you're in project management, eventually you work with people over and over on different types of projects. So
Yeah.
it's always beneficial to be nice, as it were.
Well, yeah, I think one of the coolest things that ever happened to me, there was a PMO I ran in Dallas, and years later I ran into some of the people that had worked there, and they came up to me like, that was the greatest job I've ever had. Like working for you was just so awesome. And to be able to create that for people, like it's a moment when you're together for however long, and if you can use that time with them to enrich their lives and their work and rise together, I mean, that persists way beyond. People don't remember the project, they remember the interaction. And I always try to approach it with that, like, this is about, for however long we're going to be together, I want to do whatever I can to make you want to come back and work with me again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You've evolved in your career. Obviously, you were one of the leaders that got into agile early, and I would say leaned very well in terms of being able to leverage your project management background and agile. And having interacted with you before, I can see that you've kind of brought them together in your day-to-day activities and
Couple
in
times,
your
yeah.
career. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. How was that? Was that a huge shift, or would you say that it was kind of a smooth transition?
Oh no, it was awful. So a lot of people find agile and they're like, oh, and that was the thing I'd been looking for years. I was dragged kicking and screaming into it. And when I was on the board of the ITTC, I campaigned against it because all I saw was a lack of planning and developers having excuses to not commit to anything. I didn't want any part of it. And at the time, the Agile people hated project managers. I mean, there's a reason that they're not included in the Scrum Guide. So when I took my CSM class, it was with Mike Cohn. And when I was trying to establish my credibility in the class, I'm like, I'm Dave Pryor, I'm a PMP, I've taught PMP certification, and I'm on the board of the IT&T SIG, and they booed me. It was 39 software gaming developers and one project manager. I was like, what the hell? So I got myself invited to the Scrum Gathering in 2009, I think it was in Chicago. And they had an open space, and I went into the center of the room and I said, my name's Dave Pryor. I'm here as a representative of PMI. I want to know why you guys hate us and how I can fix it. And that was the beginning of everything that led to Mark and Greg going to the events and all the stuff that happened with ACP after that. Like that all came from those conversations. So in the open space, you pick a topic and a time, and I think like 5 people showed up. But those are the 5 people I needed to get started with all this. And for me, it's always been about the fact that journey from being a traditional or waterfall-minded project manager to an agilist, it took me about 8 years to let go of everything that I held so dear in terms of how the world works. And that journey was awful. I mean, people were mean. I was so bad at it. So I became a CST. I do the things I do to make that journey suck less for other people than it does for me. I know it's a crass way of saying it, but that's really how I think of it. Like it shouldn't have been that hard. I think now we've reached a point where those things they're coming together a lot better, and I think in this profession, I expect somebody who is skillful at it to be skillful with all the tools, not just one side or the other. Mm-hmm. So that whole debate, am I waterfall, am I agile, that conversation just needs to die a slow, painful death. Because you have to be both. You have to be able to leverage the right tools in the right moment. I use traditional risk management and a register on all my Scrum projects because it helps. So there's been a lot of, it's interesting now in Agile because there's so much has changed since the pandemic. And there's all these organizations that are kind of leaning back towards traditional ways because they forgot why they left it in the first place. So I'm hoping that we'll end up with something stable and positive, a combination of both.
Yeah, I think that the more idealistic people tend to be, sometimes they get stuck and they don't really evolve their way of thinking. And we all getting caught into that trap, obviously. But I think that the better approach is how do we integrate what we've learned from different projects and activities and become better at it. Because in my experience, if we focus on the customer, if we focus on the business objective or the purpose of what we want to do, then it all becomes supporting elements to delivering that for our stakeholders.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you think something that teams still get wrong about Agile today?
Wow, at the team level? I think a lot of teams are, this is sort of, they've reverted back to an ailment we had a long time ago. I think a lot of people talk about Agile theater. Companies, like, they put all this stuff in place and they pretend they're doing Agile. I think in teams, a lot of organizations, you end up with people going through the motions and they don't know why they're doing stuff and they don't think to ask, right? It's just the process we have to follow. We have to have a daily stand up, but we can't do it standing up. We can't do it for 15 minutes. So we'll do it every 4th day for 45 minutes to an hour. And they don't even realize that they're not doing it anymore. So part of being Agile for me and being on teams is you have to have something you can kind of circle back and be like, this was the starting point. Are we still in line with that? And if things aren't working, you don't just abandon them. You try to figure out why they're not working, right? How can you make, if nobody talks in your retrospective, why? If your team can't deliver, maybe it's your team, but maybe it's a systemic thing, right? I think that's a big deal. The victim mentality is also a problem. A lot of people don't feel like they have the agency, and that maybe is an organizational problem, but they can't become self-directed. And going back to the autonomy, mastery, purpose thing, I think I look at myself as having a job that I do for myself, and I get paid by different people to do it. And I think if you can approach your career and your work at the team level that way, The team is here to build cool stuff, to rise together, to grow together, to take ownership of that and responsibility for that, and find a way to work within the constraints they have to make things better for them and not walk around and be people who suffer through whatever.
Do you think that the next generation of professionals, like those who are coming in from the college level,
Yeah.
are, are they going to have an easier time adopting it simply because they have a different perspective and a different set of ideas, that Gen Z mentality?
So I'm going to sidestep the generational question so I don't get trapped in where I usually get trapped. But I have found in classes recently, there's been a lot of students who showed up that they don't know. I'll say, how many of you have worked in waterfall? They don't even know what that means, which in some respects is a blessing, but it's really hard to teach agile to people who don't know traditional project management because it's a fix for traditional project management. I think that the lack of history is maybe a burden, but a lot of them have been teaming and stuff all through college now, so they're kind of wired for that mindset, But I think that there's a lot of, I don't know, I sound like an old man on a porch waving his cane. There's a lot of history that I think has given me a better understanding of why we do what we do. Like understanding the problems that Frederick Taylor was trying to solve helps you understand project management better. Understanding that helps you understand Agile better, or the Agile practices better. So it's sort of like they started watching Star Wars at the Phantom Menace and don't understand that there were actually good movies before that. So
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I see a lot of people getting into the project management profession in broad terms that come from different backgrounds, whether it's industries or journeys. And I think that when they come without that baggage, sometimes it's easier for them to just jump in and get the work done.
yes, it is easier. I would think, because you brought up the generational thing, I'm going to walk into it a little bit. My generation, to Gen X, I think we expect to not be thanked. We expect everything to be hard, and we expect to have to work in the mailroom for 6 years. We have a hard time accepting that other people might not. Like, we actually did that stuff, and now other people don't have to, and which is awesome. But we're like you put into time, So it's, I think the bigger challenge for the younger generation is having to put up with the older generation.
Yeah, but getting out of the way sometimes as well.
Well, yeah, there is. There's a lot of people, and I would say I was probably the same way. Like, you speak in a sophomoric way because you don't know better. You think all ideas are valid. Some of your ideas might not be great ideas, but they might spark a good idea for somebody else. Learning how to operate within the different systems you're in. I mean, regardless of your age, like learning when you get there, just listen first, see what's going on. You don't have to open your mouth right away. Sometimes the
Yeah.
best way to add value is just to be quiet and observe.
I think some of this also has to do with the speed of technology advancement. I mean, we've started our career 20, 30 years ago when none of the technology that we have now
With our 14.4 modems.
existed.
Yeah.
I mean, I make a joke about the fact that, when I started college and I came to the US, I had to go and get $10 and change, put them in the payphone, and make a call home. And my kids are like, "What's a
Yeah,
payphone?"
exactly.
They
What's
don't even know what a
change? Yeah.
payphone- Exactly. So there's a
And
lot
it only
to
costs a
unpack
dime.
in
How
terms
does that work? Yeah.
of technology. How do you see that technology impacting the world of project management and agile moving forward?
So there's a big conversation right now about Agile. And I think one of the challenges is the manifesto was written in 2001. The practices that came up before it and after it all solved problems we had before. We have different problems in business now. The technology is moving even faster than it did before. But I think in some respects, Agile has just become part of what we do. Like, it's not even a thing you need to talk about anymore because it's just how we learn to work. So how do we keep the focus on improving our practice of that? I think a lot of people have gotten a bit lazy with it. and they go through the motions of it, like I mentioned before. But Agile is evolving, and it's going to be impacted really heavily, obviously by AI, right? I think that's the question people seem to be asking now is like, how do we use Agile and AI together? It's like, well, you haven't even figured out how to use it with the stuff you couldn't do right before. What, like, what are you going to do now? But I think that is transforming the speed of information is transforming everything that we do, and finding
Yeah.
ways to just at the beginning of the internet, it was hard to figure out what you were supposed to learn. But if you learned HTML, you could get a job, and you were like considered to be really smart. Now with AI, the field is so broad, and there's so much information from so many different sources, and it's changing so fast that even figuring out like what do I have to learn to be current. I mean, the practices, they're fairly solidified. They're not dramatically changing. Why are we not getting better at them? Why are we scaling the inability to deliver software? And then when you put AI on top of that, what are you supposed to know to be valid in your job anymore? That's hard.
I remember discussions that I've had with people coming out of college. The focus was not so much at learning skills that you can apply immediately, but rather learning how to learn so that you can jump in and then begin to develop those skills that you apply in your job day to day.
Right.
So it's almost kind of like coming back full circle to a certain extent, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but you don't need to learn anymore because you got YouTube. You can just watch stuff on there and figure it out. But I think that there is what you said is absolutely true. You would put in that time. It's like learning an instrument, right? Nobody plays violin well on the first day. It takes years to be able to do that. And there was a lot more tolerance for that. One thing that's happening right now, at least in the States, is a friend of mine who does a lot of digital agency work, right? They're hiring young, inexperienced project managers over experienced pros because they want somebody they can teach. So maybe there's an investment that's happening there that kind of went away for a while. Putting in the time, being willing to find mentors, and mentors being willing to help people. That was another benefit I got from the SIG was, people like Bob Tarney and Mark Lurch, like they mentored me. They taught me how to be a professional. And if you're not getting that out of where you work, you have to find that someplace. So it's the job, how to do the job, but also how to be a professional in the systems that you're working in, I think.
How much did you talked about mentors and them teaching you. It sounds like you've had a lot of opportunities to apply things that you learned from your volunteerism activities directly in your
Oh,
day-to-day job. And
100%.
that's a very interesting thing that most of us have had that experience. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
Well, I'll give you a really simple example. So, being on the board of the IT&T SIG gave me a flavor of what it's like to be on a board of directors. And I see people now who haven't had that experience or are trying to get that experience. And just in terms of how to operate within an organization and to run something like a business, there's just so much more that you have to learn about the systems you work in, the people you work with, the organizational structure, how it impacts everything. It's not just like I'm a project manager, this is what I do. Everything I do ripples out throughout the rest of the company. And if I don't know what the company values and what the company's driving, my project is, I'm not going to be as valuable to my project team. Because one of the things about, I think this is still true to a certain extent. When I mentioned I went to that Scrum gathering in the beginning, I asked Jim Cundiff, I could explain the value of project or Agile to a project manager, but what is the value of project management to an Agilist? And he said they don't know how to go upstairs, which meant a lot of the Agilists in that first and second generation, they were all about the freedom of Agile, and it was sort of like this very loose, casual thing. But you couldn't put them in a room with executives because they would start telling the executives all the things they were doing wrong. And they didn't know how to social engineer that conversation. They didn't learn the language of the people in the room. I think that project management teaches you that if you can volunteer, if you can get experience working with leadership in any capacity, then you develop an ear for speaking to the people you're speaking to in the language that matters to them and the values that matter to them. And I think that we're, as project managers, we're kind of chameleons. We always have to be able to play to the room, whatever that room is, if it's developers, if it's executives, whatever. And through volunteering, I was, people in all different countries. Like, I've just been so blessed with that. It's been really incredible.
Absolutely. So as we kind of think about the next generation, I want you to kind of think back to the beginning of your career. If you were to go back the 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
what piece of advice would you give your younger self in terms of what mistake you might have done, what opportunity maybe you could capitalize on that maybe would be transformative in your career?
So there's a couple things. One is, maybe they're the same thing. I'm not really sure. There were things that I were very, very sure of, that I was right, and and had a very limited view and understanding. But I would like go to bat on stuff and fight with people about stuff, only to realize later, like, I had no idea what I was talking about, because I was very closed and not open to whatever I know may be precious to me, but it also may be wrong. And I think there's this saying, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, which is just meant to say, like, stuff matters and it's important and sacred, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't just be able to push it aside if you absolutely have to. So all the things I know are important, but they also might not count anymore. They might be wrong. And developing the ability to let go of that is important. The other thing that I wish I had learned earlier was it's okay to tell people you don't know. And that was like, to be able to stand in a room full of people and have enough self-confidence to say, I don't understand this problem at all. Like that takes a lot. And maybe that's just mileage and years, but to recognize that the ultimate act of confidence is being able to say, I don't know this, I don't understand this, I will go figure it out, instead of trying to pretend and play your way through it. Because I think, it's like an imposter syndrome thing. Like, most people I know early on in their career, when they don't know something, they try to pretend they do. And that makes it worse, because it makes it obvious to the other people. And I'm like, not only are you wrong, but you don't even know that you're wrong. So I'm a lot quicker to admit that I don't have all the answers, that I'm not. Any project manager should come to grips with the fact that you're not actually in control of anything at all. You just react, hopefully faster than other people. Those are important lessons, but they might be lessons you only learn the hard way, I think.
Yeah, perhaps. I used to think that, smart people learn from their mistakes and geniuses learn from other people's mistakes. But more recently, I was told maybe that's not even a possibility, that we have to learn from our mistakes. So I guess the jury's out on that.
Well, the great thing is
that can be
the
done.
lesson keeps showing back up until you get it right. It's going to keep presenting itself. So that's another thing. If you think about it in terms of a career, or you think about it as it's about your relationship with the people and not just the project and the deadline, and that people are human beings and you have to treat them with that level of respect and humanity, you play a longer game and you think about things from a systems thinking standpoint, I think you're going to be much better off.
I think it's humbling, because when we look at certain definitions of success that maybe we didn't meet, specifically related to time and cost, and yet the outcome is a very positive one, you start wondering, well, maybe there's opportunity for improvement beyond just one or two dimensions of success.
Well, and that's been really challenging to me with PMI's new definition of success, that the customer has to feel like they got value for the work. Because back in the day, like, there were projects I worked on that were complete disasters that I did an awesome job on as a project manager. Like, you want to drive this bus off a cliff? It's not a good idea. Here's all the things that are going to go wrong. And if you still say you want to do it, I'm like, let's go. I'll call an ambulance. Because my job was to listen to what you said you needed and to make sure you got it. But now with this expanded definition, I have a lot more responsibility, which it's interesting to see, going to be interesting to see what happens to this generation of project managers coming up now. If that is their measure of success, if it's not just I did the things I was supposed to do, the fact that my client doesn't know what they actually want for dinner, like, that's not my problem. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that affects our profession.
The good news is that it's situational. And then the second thing is because of the way that these definitions get built, there's always opportunity to tweak it
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit scary to me that I could do my job incredibly well and do everything I'm supposed to do and deliver exactly what the customer asked for. And if they're not happy because the product idea that they came up with doesn't work in market, how is that my job? Like it places a lot more responsibility on us. And I'm curious about it. I'm not 100% sure that I'm sold on the fact that I am responsible for your vision being sound. But I do think it's my responsibility to ask you questions that test your vision.
Mhm.
So,
And I think it's part of the reality that we live in multiple sandboxes in project management. It's not just the execution sandbox. We do have
right.
at least a hand in the strategy sandbox. So we have to somehow, figure out how to be accountable for without being completely accountable for it. Dave, we could probably talk for another couple of hours. It's been a blast, and I really appreciate you joining me on this chat. Thanks again for
I'm grateful to you for having
saying
me.
yeah.
Thank you. And it was great catching up too.
Wonderful to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Absolutely. This is Philip Diab with Project Management Matters. Thanks.
Thanks.